I get enormous pleasure from the drawing. And in some ways, I prefer the drawings to the paintings because they really just are what they are. I always draw on A4 copier paper, and I used to have a routine of drawing. I haven't done it for a year now, really, though I do occasionally of drawing for an hour every morning to sort of calibrate myself. So I have thousands and thousands of drawings on A4 copier paper. They go right back to the early 1990s. I don't really do sketchbooks, but I have a lot of sketches. They're not for a project, they're a calibration, kind of lining up my head and my hand and thinking a little bit, and even aligning myself with the studio in some way. You know, in some fruity way I think it was meditational, but really what I'm trying to do is sort of, in fact, all of these, most of them are from, you know, Vogue or they're not from meaningful sources, you know, in terms of content, but they're just so that when I paint, there's also an immense pleasure in doing this and just going through it and thinking it through line by line as you do it. But the actual practical application is not to make the drawing, it's to get it so that my hand knows where the tip of the brush is when I paint. And if I don't do that, then I make less confident and more revisions, which are also not so good. The revisions make the painting more indirect. And in fact, in some ways, I actually want the painting to be more like the drawings, which is that it's a straight line connection. But essentially I have a printout or I have a page from Vogue or whatever, and I just follow it, the entire thing, all the way through. I mean, I'm not doing it in some very literal-minded way, it's got to be one line, but I don't care about any of the modeling or whatever. I'm often paying attention to the margins of the shadows so that I end up with areas and zones that are a meaningful relational point if I'm going to transfer it into a painting or something. Also, fashion magazines have incredible photographs of drapery and cloth and arms and body language. I mean, some of it's stylized, but it's very accessible and beautiful and available. And the shapes are easy to like and easy to pay attention to. That's from something else. I don't know. This is a bit older. This is actually from a page from a magazine I probably had for 35 years, and I've probably drawn it 10 or 15 times in that period, which is true of a lot of these. Some of them are 30 years old, and you'll see a much cruder version of this and because I didn't even know this existed back then. For me, this is a mature form for me. There's a much simpler one. That's probably 10 years old. That's a little bit older. But I'm getting towards what I would say a more capable form. That's actually quite recent, but I wasn't trying to seriously. A bit old. I painted a bunch of cricket people 20 years ago, which was properly interesting. Whereas for me, this is a kind of thinking drawing, trying to find out what are the important bits of information to carry across and what am I practicing that will be useful really when I paint, This is a much earlier one. This is probably 25 years old or 30 years old. And in fact, again, I still have this printout, and I drew from this one last year as well, and there may be one in this stack, I don't know. But I quite like that, and I often draw from the same source multiple times. I didn't do the modern one in order to make this one obsolete, but I like seeing them next to one another. It's interesting to see. I put this in because this is an example of drawing two drawings done the same, probably 10 minutes apart from the same source, printed out the same size that I draw it at. So I did one and then I did another one. I mean, they're actually pretty equivalent, but they're not the same drawing. And each time when you do one, you learn something, you can bring it to the next one. And it's almost like practicing a song. And you don't know what it is that's going to make it be better or worse or have meaning. This is an early one. Again, I mean, what I'm interested in when I say early, blah, 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 late, is that here I'm kind of imposing a slight simplification mentality over the material. Whereas in the other ones, these ones, I'm really trying to not even exist in the drawing. I'm trying to just be a conduit for bringing across that line. That one's maybe 10 or 15 years old. That was Lily Cole, who weirdly I later photographed. That's recent, but not very good. This one I drew from a lot. I mean, a lot of these pages are from magazines that are now 30 years old.
Did you keep the pages also?
I keep the pages, yeah. I drew from this one many times. I drew from this one many times. Those two are from the same drawing, from the same photograph. All of it is kind of counterintuitive in the sense that often the more accurate you are, the more useless it is as a drawing. You have to have, some of the information has to be meaningful. But actually the ones that are really nice are the ones where they really drift at the very margins of being comprehensible. These are all a little bit different. These are from a project I'm working on, which is I had to design a robot, which I've done for years. For this particular robot, I've painted for 40 years. But I actually had to design one that could then be sculpted really in ZBrush and turned into a model. So I did hundreds and hundreds of these robot drawings. You're drawing an in-between zone. You're not being specific about what the details are. You're finding what might be available there, even in terms of proportions or mechanics or leaving things out. So we're gonna have a little run of these. So there's one. This was the character. A slightly different one, different idea of robotics. Different one. I mean, they're all the same, but they're all different. And again, like with these, I know that form so well, and I've done it so many times that you can play around with whether you want to. They seem very minor, but opportunities to deform the shape and in some way make it surprising and functional. Different idea for a slightly more organic arm. Trying to figure out lower legs. Idea based on prosthetic hooks.
How many of these do you do in 45 minutes? Well,
45 minutes you can probably do 10, of which 3 are interesting. And it doesn't matter because again, it's a calibration. This was thinking about some of the more the mechanics of the internal of the robot. Kind of a stupid idea for legs, which was based on the Boston Dynamics robots, but really looked terrible when I did it. More robots. Okay, we're out of the robots. End of the robots.
That's Mr. Sausage, right?
That's Mr. Sausage, yeah. Those are very valuable now, I can tell you.
Yeah, it's Sony.
What I did try, I tried to make sure there were some terrible drawings in here, rather than have every cream drawing show up, on the top.
Which ones are the terrible ones?
Then none of them are terrible, good, bad, or anything, but they're incompetent and poorly conceived. I remember doing this one, and I just liked it. It's got some of the peculiarities of that woman's anatomy in there. And it's not wrong, but it's not trying to be anything anyway. It's not trying to prove any point or serve any purpose. That as well. I have to apologize for all the fashiony drawings, but that's how it is. This is a preparation for doing a photo shoot where I wanted to have some way of thinking about dealing with the models and what I wanted them to do and what would be interesting angles. Actually, Iggy Pop. That's actually Iggy Pop. That. Now here's. I remember doing this and thinking that's terrible. Even though it was quite accurate, it just looked awful. Never mind. There you go. People vacuuming. It's inevitable.
I would like to know the story of that.
The story of that is when my son was about 2 or 3. And I was looking after him half the time. We had some day where I let him choose and he said, draw me Mr. Can of Mushy Peas. So I did. Draw me Mr. Cup of Tea. So I did. Draw me Mr. Tuna Fish Sandwich. So I did. Draw me Mr. Sausage. So I did. They were really kind of great in a way. They were so stupid. And then for my birthday, my wife silkscreened Mr. Sausage onto like 10 T-shirts and so on. And he looked great there. And I'm always afraid that Mr. Sausage will be interpreted as like a proxy for me, as if it's like a secret sign-off for me. Not true. So I collage photographs. I collage a lot of drawings as well, though there are a few collage drawings here. And that's always interesting, because you do many drawings where part of it is rubbish and part of it is interesting. Like this, I remember, this is old. This was a photograph of a female footballer. But she was great. And the way that, and the weird foreshortening on her arm here, and the fact that this upper arm, something about how she was moving her body was so narrow, but that was the truth of it. Her arm actually looked like that. And, in some ways, you're always looking for the aberration. You're really building a muscle memory. You're building something so that the quality doesn't matter. What matters is that you're putting it where you want it to be. It's a huge difference to make a genuinely informed, confident brushstroke, or to cut the edge of something and to be able to do it without even thinking about it in that muscle memory way. And you only do that by practicing and building up that relationship. When I'm doing anything, I listen to the same CD for 5 or 6 months in a row, 8 hours a day. And when you go into the studio and turn it on, you just drop right back into where you were. And it's actually at the end of that 5 or 6 months when you've used it up, it's like makes you feel nauseous with despair because you have to replace it with something else. Old but funny.
But then you don't come back to the same CD?
No, you would find something else. I mean, you might 12 years, 15 years later find it and go back. When you put the CD on, it's like putting a key into a lock, you know. Your brain is ready. And in fact, even when I walk to the studio, that CD is playing in my brain already. And when I put it on, exactly everything lines up. The shape of the CD coming into the room and the receiving part of my brain are completely sympathetic. And that's the great pleasure for me of doing it. I don't really worry about the drawing, but I've totally entered into the CD. I know every aspect. I honestly do, you know. I mean, I've heard their music more than they've ever heard their own music or whatever. You know, I'm sure you could see something happening with brain waves or something settling down or any of that. I mean, it is unbelievably fantastic for attention span and paying attention, you know. And when you're doing it, you actually weirdly, you're doing this, but your brain is listening to the music. You're not looking at the lines and making decisions, or even saying like this one, her arm here is actually a very strange shape. It doesn't, you know, it's just that happened, this happened, the music's going on. Don't worry about it. I've drawn her many times. She was delivering an opera, I have to say. More football guys. The football guys are only great because they're completely unself-conscious with their bodies. Their body's doing, it's like somebody being hit with a water cannon. They're not really worrying about their performance at all. They're really totally sincerely getting on with it. These are from the early 90s or late 80s even. And in fact, I can tell you, I can remember sitting on my friend's houseboat and his girlfriend had a copy in a Vogue and I drew this out of it.
How do you pick the photos?
Yeah, I go, I like it.
It's just that I like
Yeah,
it,
you just
right?
go, I like it. If I don't like it, honestly, I'm being totally sincere. And also, you know, I've done many drawings that I've thrown away. I've kept all these because they all had something on them. I'm going to go. I want to go into the easy territory. I don't want to go into the difficult territory. I really honestly remember. I don't remember doing every one of these drawings, but I do remember all of the references, and I do kind of remember doing some of the drawings. I loved the way that hand folded. I don't care about anything else, but the way the hand came around is so true of a hand. That is, I think, Joan Didion, from some article on her. I can't remember. That is Charlotte Rampling. That's my stupid character.
That's it. How did you start working like every morning, just like being really disciplined? Do you felt like really early on, or like?
It's more. It doesn't really discipline. You know, I'm not that disciplined unless I have a show, but it is habit, and also the drawing is pleasurable, and even to look at the photographs that you're drawing from is pleasurable. If I'm going to do a show, the main thing that I want is to feel my hand connected to my head and not have to tell it anything. You know what I mean? You don't ever want to be thinking down, left, right, too big, too little, whatever. The thing about the show, though, is that all the paintings are sort of on a theme in a way. The theme comes afterwards. You look at it afterwards and you say, this was the theme. But suddenly you're trying to look for images that have some relevance to each other and some electricity between them. And I draw from those as well, but I don't really draw. This is more like my habit, practice, warm-up. Those drawings are a little bit different. But they come out of these drawings. But it's all pleasure, because I wouldn't have chosen those photographs if I didn't like to think about them, really.
So I'm gonna ask you to draw something in our sketchbook of the show. You can do whatever.
I'll draw something, if you want. Yeah. Generally, I would draw from a photograph or something, but I can draw something. I'll just draw you.
Okay, I don't mind. That's. Do you have the pens or?
I don't have a pen or anything.
You don't have anything?
I have no pen. Anything is fine. I'm just gonna do a little outline of you. I'm not gonna do anything special.
Just pick a web page, well, yeah.
Oh my God, it's a big fat fucking nib. That's it. That's how it goes. You gave me a big fat nib and
No,
anyway.
you could pick those.
It's all fine. I mean, that's how it goes. That's what it's like, you know?
That was amazing. It's like I saw the calibration you were speaking.
Anyway.
Because
Not a great example, but you know what I mean. It's
I know, but
yeah.
it sounded like a photocopy machine or something.
Well, you're scanning away.
Yeah, and you were scanning. I was looking at your eyes, and you were scanning.
But
it
you know,
looked like
when I draw, and it's like this is not a good example, but when I draw, one of the things that I do, because there's so many complicated things anyway. Like I'm trying to reduce it. I don't want to think about rendering, okay, and so on. I don't want to think about color. I don't want to think about composition. I'm trying to pay all my attention on the one thing that seems meaningful. And the other thing I don't want to worry about is I don't want to worry about scale. So I always print it out and draw it the same size. If you look at a lot of really functional, practical, great draftsmen historically, their drawings are quite neutral. Their drawings are not beautiful aesthetic drawings. And the way they've handled the charcoal or whatever is quite brutal and to the point. They're interested in angles. They're interested in proportions. They're interested in some bit of information that actually will be important later on when they deal with it. See what I mean?
Yeah, of course. I don't think you signed this one, did you? Can you sign it?
I can sign as well with your big fat pen. You presented me with a series of horrible implements. Choose your favorite.
Just favorite stuff. And one last thing, put it at the side and sign
here?
Wherever, if you big, small, there, but yeah.
That's how it is. Well.